Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another video here on the RCexplained channel. Now in this video, we're going to be going through which power system component should we select first as best practice. Now in this video, we're only going to be talking about the power system component that we have to select first. We're not going to get into talking about the other components in any detail today in this video. The reason why it's important to select that first is because it is essentially going to set you up to select that second and third component. Now we already have a video on the channel that talks in full detail about how to pick a power system right from the beginning to the end for a radio controlled boat. We will have videos similar to this on radio controlled cars as well as radio controlled airplanes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss those videos when they come out. Now, if you want to know ahead of time when those videos are coming out, make sure you follow us on that Patreon page. The link will be in the description below. Now, before we actually start talking about whether we select the speed control first or the battery pack first, or the brushless motor within our power system first, we must talk about the radio controlled vehicle. You can't select a power system without knowing what you're actually going to be putting it in. So here I have a 1/18 scale truck, and we're going to select a power system for this. Now obviously these components are not the ones that are going to fit in this vehicle. They are simply much too large. However, the components that we've already selected are installed within this vehicle, and we're simply going to be looking at the process to select that first component that goes into this vehicle. The first question that we do have is how much power is this vehicle actually going to consume or take in order to hit our goal? We're looking for a speed goal of around 20 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour on a hard surface such as a roadway. Now that's important because you need to know how fast you want to go. That will change the amount of power that you're going to require for your specific application. The next thing is to know how much power this is actually going to consume. Now I've never actually operated a 1/18 scale vehicle ever before. I don't know how much power this actually will consume. So how did I find out and figure out what I'm going to need? Well, the process is actually quite simple. It does take time. You do have to go and investigate and figure it out. But one of the things that I did is I hopped onto a forum and I figured out what guys are running. It looked like that guys were running either a 2-cell lithium polymer battery pack, 3-cell lithium polymer battery pack, or a 4-cell lithium polymer battery pack. And I was shocked and surprised when I heard and saw that they're running a 4-cell pack within this vehicle. The next thing that I looked at is the speed control that they were using. I wanted that maximum continuous rating of the speed control so I can use that number to multiply with the voltage of the battery pack to end up with a wattage for that specific vehicle. Now, of course, if you were to operate that vehicle right at the absolute limit of that specific component, that would not be practical. So what I did is I took a percentage of that to arrive at what I would deem as a more practical value. For example, I came out with an understanding of 180 to 200 continuous watts of power for this specific vehicle. However, you're not going to operate at that limit, or at least you should not. Therefore, I looked at operating at around 150 watts for this specific vehicle. Once you end up figuring out you're going to need about 150 watts of power by looking at what other guys are running and following their setups, now you need to figure out which of these components that you select first. Well, the easy one is you should be able to eliminate the speed control, as this is not going to be the first component that you pick out. Now, figuring out which component to select first out of the battery pack as well as the motor is a little bit more tricky. In best practice, it would be best to select our battery pack first. Now remember how I said this vehicle specifically, guys were running it on 2S, 3S, as well as even 4S battery packs. That's a lot of different selections that you can actually make within this vehicle. And all of them were hitting at least that 20 to 25 mile an hour goal that I set out to achieve, which is about 40 kilometers an hour, or just shy of 40 kilometers an hour. The next thing that I have to do is figure out what I plan to run. And based on the battery packs that I already own a 2S battery pack that would fit right into the battery bay very nicely. Therefore, I went with a 2S battery pack selection. Now, it's very important to acknowledge that the reason why we're selecting that battery pack first is because I did have choices within my car. I can run 2S, I can run 3S, and I can also even run 4S if I wanted as well. I chose a 2S setup because it works for me for what I'm trying to do, and it also matches the battery packs that I already own. I don't want to have a different battery pack for every single vehicle that I own. I try to make sure that a battery pack operates multiple different vehicles, or I can at least shrink the inventory size that I have of battery packs. Now, this is exactly why picking the battery pack is important, because once we have that battery pack, we can then go and figure out the motor specifically. We know all the information about that battery pack. We know the voltage that this is going to operate. We then know how much power that battery pack is going to have to throw at the motor in order to operate at the 150 watts that we initially selected for this vehicle. We can then even pick the capacity as well as the C rating to make sure that it adds up to provide the continuous power that we require. Now, it's really important to make sure that you're selecting your battery pack first. And the primary reason is if you would have selected your brushless motor first, it would essentially lock you into a specific battery that you now have to run. However, some guys are running 2 and 3 and even 4S LiPo in here. For every single battery cell count, you're going to have a different kV value selected for your brushless motor, and that is the big difference in this. For example, looking at a setup within this car from a 2S versus a 4S lithium polymer battery pack, that would essentially double the amount of RPM that you could possibly get out of this motor if that kV value did not change. Now, the only way to compensate for that is to go deep within your radio control vehicle and change that specific gearing that you have in there. And odds are the gearing that you can change within this car is not going to be able to adapt and change down to 50% of the output RPM. There are also limitations within the gearing to get you back down to where you need to be. That's why, in a nutshell, it's important to select that battery pack first. Now that you have selected that battery pack for your setup, you can then go and select the motor for your setup as well as the speed control. For your motor selection, you know the target speed that you wish to hit. Now you got to work out the gearing within that vehicle as well as the tire diameter in order to calculate the kV that you need within this motor. Once you have that locked down, the next thing is to figure out the physical size of motor you need, which is going to be able to handle that 150 watts that you require for this specific setup. The next thing to look at is your speed control. Once you have both of these things locked down, you know the amount of current that you're going to have to pull through that motor. Make sure you give yourself a little bit of headroom and select a speed control that has a current rating higher than that motor is going to require. Then the next thing is to make sure the speed control has a voltage rating that can operate within the range that you plan to run. We're going to go 2S within here. We expect to use a 2S specific speed control in our vehicle. That pretty well sums it up for this video and what component that you should be selecting first. Like the video if you do, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that I can see you in that next video. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.